to the Marketing and Me podcast. If you're eager to grow your health and wellness business via effective marketing methods while maintaining your own health and wellness, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Leanne Shelton, health and wellness content coach and copywriter at Right Time Marketing. Today, I'm joined by business clarity coach, Artemiss Keyhani. Welcome, Artemiss.
Thank you, Leanne.
And so at ArtemissK, which is her business name, Artemiss supports her clients to overcome their overwhelm, connect with their inner wisdom, and develop confidence in working with their personal values and strengths. With a background in marketing, a passion for personal development, and a firm belief that small business can change society for the better, she believes self-awareness is the key to living a joyous life and creating an empowered business. Oh, I love that. So Artemiss and I first bonded at a women's circle, I believe it was, a few years ago, where we shared some of our deep thoughts and tuned into our inner goddess. And since then, we've frequently mingled across the networking circuit and attended each other's sessions and events and, bounced off ideas of one another on various occasions as well. Like Artemiss's smile just lights up the room, and a positive energy, which you'll feel today, is only one of the reasons why people are drawn to work with her. So I'm really excited to have her on the show and share some of her intuitive insights. Yay!
Thanks, Leah. That sounds wonderful.
You are wonderful. And so how are things going for you at the moment?
Yeah, we're doing good. I'm actually really enjoying having my kids at home. They're tweens, so they're quite self-sufficient. And hubby and I are used to working from home. So everything's been, a little bit different because of the situation, but we're going pretty well. Everybody's in good spirits.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. And would you like to just share a little bit more about you, your business journey, and what you do?
I'd love to. Thanks, Leanne. So I was born in Iran almost 50 years ago, and we moved to the US when I was 7. Then we came to Australia when I was 15. So I've lived in 3 different continents, different experiences, different cultures. And I've been with my very Aussie, oi husband for 25 years now. And we have 2 twin children. As you said, I started my career in design and marketing. And through that, a couple of times when I freelanced for myself, I really fell in love with the process of business and customer service. So that when I actually got headhunted, I went in as a client manager in a design studio. And then I stopped work to have my first baby, thinking I was going to be on maternity leave for 6 months. But then I held that baby for the first time, and I knew that I wanted to be the one at home raising her. Now, that would have been easy enough, maybe not, but it went against every role model I'd ever seen in my life, because both my sister and my older sister and my mom both went back to work soon after they had their babies. I don't think I actually knew any stay-at-home mothers, particularly in that time of my life, but it just felt so right for me. And thankfully, my husband was also believed in that. We both agreed on it. So, but what happened was, because I was basically unbecoming everything that I had spent the first 36 years of my life believing I was. I was very defined by my income, my job title, my independence, my whole lot of things, which I can now see was very externally derived. So then, following my heart with being a stay-at-home mom, but also being a workaholic, being a perfectionist, being a whole lot of things that didn't lend itself to being a stay-at-home mom, mean that in the process of the unbecoming, I also went through almost a decade of high anxiety and depression. So they sometimes call that the dark night of the soul. I call it my dark decade. But it's also what allowed me to start feeling a lot more into who am I when all the facade is gone. So I have been interested in personal development and spiritual growth since my early 20s. But it was all very kind of almost pedestrian in how I applied it to my life until, when I became a mother and everything had to change, because I was no longer living in the pattern that I had created. So everything went up a notch as far as growing and becoming. So basically from that experience, plus my love for business, I now work as you said, a business clarity coach. And I support my clients, with developing what we beautifully term as emotional intelligence these days. It's similar type of things, different names, which is great because it gives it new breath, new life. And it's basically about allowing us to take full responsibility who we are and growing into our greatest potential. That's the crux of what drives me in life and drives me in business.
Yeah, as you said, I think people are a lot more mindful of that stuff now as well. It's not just, oh, well, this is just the way it is. This is what I have to do every day as a mum. This is what it looks like. It's more, connecting with yourself and go, what do I actually want? Not what society tells me I want.
Yes. And even if you just see it on Facebook, the conversation around mental health and, the mental load of mothers. There's so much conversation now that I love it. It gets me so excited that, my 20-year-old, 5-year-old nieces talk about their experiences with depression, whereas, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't talk about this stuff. So the fact that we're a lot more vocal about it, we're open to discussing it and sharing it rather than hiding it, means I believe that's a really positive step forth just across all aspects of life, really.
Yeah, I love that. We need people like you, that's for sure. Especially after all this virus stuff. It's really brought up a lot of issues for people, I think. I heard this amazing analogy about squeezing an orange, what comes out, orange juice. That juice was inside you. It just went squeezed. So all that stress, all that anger, that was in you anyway. Just you've been under pressure. And so that's come out of you and you just have to now work out how do you manage that.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I heard it on a podcast the other day and I'm like, oh, I have to use that. Yeah. So I've mentioned it today. So there you go. So tell us more about what type of customers or clients you help and their issues.
Okay. So for me to be most effective with who I work with, I have 3 identifying factors, if you want to call it that. One is they have to personally believe that personal development is a vital part of business growth. I mean, a lot of people in our circles, Leanne, we believe this, but it's not necessarily the norm in all businesses. So for me, the entrepreneur I work with, they have to believe that personal development is important because they understand that who they are as a person is directly linked to how their business grows and how successful in an authentic way, authentic success their business is. Secondly, they have to want to embody their personal values and ethics in their business, rather than having one person being who they are at home and with their family and then stepping into almost that facade that, I spoke about before when they're, at work. And hopefully the two of them never meet in a dark alley because they wouldn't recognize each other.
Well, I think that's right. Now people are finding that when they're working at home and kids are in the background, they are like suddenly coming together.
The worlds are colliding. Definitely. So wanting to become the whole person. And obviously we pick and choose what parts of ourselves we show in any interaction. But it's about consciously choosing rather than putting up a pretense or being at work and making choices that you would never want reflected back on your own family. So being the whole of us in all of our integrity and authenticity in all aspects of our life, family and business. And thirdly, what I found is the clients who get the most out of what I support them with is they're past the startup stage. Now that could be 6 months, that could be 3 years. So it's not necessarily a time frame, but it's more about they have had enough experience knocking around in their business so that they've started to get a feel for what they do well, but then where their blocks are, where their repeating patterns are. Because breaking through the blocks and those limiting beliefs is where I support them to get to the next level in themselves and their business. So those are the kinds of clients that I work with. And as far as the kind of challenges I support them, I'd say a lot of it goes around here's some examples. dealing with overwhelm, the repeating beliefs and patterns that keep them stuck, and the lack of priorities in goal setting. So what that might look at like is if someone has like multiple ideas for their business, but their focus is so scattered and they're putting a whole lot of energy but not actually getting proportionate results because they're not staying with something long enough. And you can get disillusioned and the overwhelm and then the burnout. And it'd be such a shame to deny the world your gift because you spread yourself out too thin. So, and then there's like the idea of the limiting beliefs. We can keep setting certain targets over and over and over, but we end up finding that we're sabotaging ourselves. So that can become to do with their beliefs around money, their self-worth, those kind of patterns. That's where often it shows up. Money is like one of the big areas where our patterns show up really well in business. And then when it comes to prioritizing goals, the problem can be that we'll say we have a goal for, say, our family and a goal for our business and a goal for our health. But if we're not really clear about the priorities, what we can find is we can think that I'm just juggling a lot of balls. I have to get better at juggling. Instead of realizing that actually one of your goals is juggling balls and the other goal is spinning plates. You can't do both of them at the same time.
Well, some people could. Circus clowns.
But what I found is sometimes what the goals ask of us, if we try and do them concurrently, right? So sometimes if we say, I want to be a hands-on mother, but I also want to make $50,000 a month doing this. Like looking at the practical details, for some people, some businesses, it might be possible. But you have to look at your own situation and go, is that possible? And if it's not, be honest about what our own priorities are so we can make conscious choices instead of thinking we're chasing everything at the same time, but we're kind of clashing. It's kind of like when you're trying to put the two north poles of a magnet together, it starts doing that wobbly rejection thing, right? So goal setting in itself is a really important thing, but also being really aware because every goal has a cost. The resources, energy, time we put on one thing means we're not putting that on something else. And we have to make sure we're choosing that consciously. So those are some of the areas that I work with my clients on.
Oh, and some of those, yes, kind of ring true to me. I know that I often have big goals, but then like, oh, hang on, but my kids are young and I still want to be part of the P&C, for example, at the schools, which involves some volunteer work. And I still want to, I have my nights and my weekends. So I need to be realistic of what can be achieved. And sometimes you put that unnecessary pressure on yourself when you're like, hang on, this time in my life, maybe that's just not achievable. What can I actually achieve right now? What's realistic to keep, because I don't want to ever see my family life falling. I've seen the movies like Click and The Devil Wears Prada where, it's all about work and then your personal life falls down. I think I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but I've always been mindful of that. So you're always asking yourself that question, does this actually fit my life?
It's an important question and it's really hard because not everything is equally valued by society. So, the more we have that sense of our inner compass, the easier it would be to stay with whatever is our true priority. But, as society is changing, but for many of us who came from a corporate background, your position in a company and the money you earn is much more important than the health of your family or how available you are in your children, especially like you said, when they're young. And that's when they, most need you. They don't ever so far quite not need you, but it does get a little less intense as they get older. So if you imagine if society valued family and parenting the way it values money and position, then it kind of be a little bit easier to pick what is truly our priority. Whereas because it's not, sometimes if your priority isn't necessarily what is popularly believed as important, you kind of have to almost hook into a deeper level of self-belief to keep bringing yourself back to, yes, that's what I want. That's what I want, instead of feeling pulled by society's, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so I know you have a beautiful metaphor featuring a tap, hose, and bucket. Would you like to expand on that for us?
Sure. I do love my metaphors.
Yeah. Sounds at random, like, no, it's not a plumbing segment.
I do find that if I can explain something in a metaphor, then it means I've got it clear enough in my head. And then also when you're talking about kind of, concepts, but you can show it to someone from a paradigm that they do understand, it makes it easier. So basically the idea of the tap and the hose and the bucket is that when everything is running aligned, you can have your tap full on, the hose is functioning, there's no holes in it, and the bucket is catching all of the effort. So in this case, the tap is who we are and why we do business. So who we are as a person, comes to our sense of discernment and knowing what's right for us and what's not right for us, taking full responsibility for the choices we make so we can own any of the things that don't go right and learn and grow from it. And that also gives us confidence, because that sense of self-trust is imperative in having confidence to make the best decisions. Because, you kind of go, well, if you make a mistake, that's okay. I know I can learn from it, rather than having a kind of, I think sometimes we can be so perfectionistic that it keeps us paralyzed, because we don't give ourselves the grace of, well, if I make a mistake, that's okay. I'll grow from it, right? So that's also where the limiting beliefs around money and being good enough, etc., comes in, as well as what we mentioned about values and purpose. So I find the more we are our own full person, so we're very consciously aware of what our values and purpose is, and then finding a way to put that in our business. Doesn't matter if you're an energy healer or a plumber or a professor, who you are and all your values and your purpose can come into every interaction of how you do your profession or your business. So the more that is in alignment, and that is from like a harmonious space, the more full on the tap is turned on, which is you and your knowledge and what you put out there, right? And then the hose, which is connected to the tap, this is how we do business and who we serve. So again, if we have a scattered focus, it's like having holes in the hose instead of everything flowing in one direction. If we are too generic about who we serve because we don't really understand who are the clients we can make the most wonderful difference to. And also just being really clear about the benefits of our service or product. And so it's, the clients who are really going to thrive, who are really going to, be empowered by what we do. So the more we're clear about those three kind of things, the more the hose is kink-free, hole-free. So, everything that's running out of your tap is actually flowing down that hose. And at the end, which is catching everything coming out of the hose, is the bucket, which is the accumulated effect of what we're doing in our business. So if you imagine that our tap is on flow because we're totally aligned and we're confident because we trust ourselves, and who we're focusing and what we're focusing is all aligned, so that's running through the hose beautifully, then you want the bucket to catch the full effect of all of the energy and effort you're putting into your business. So where the bucket can start getting holes in it is if we forget that we're dealing with people and we're forsaking our humanity by burning through relationships instead of nurturing them, by using fear-based marketing and unethical sales, because that disintegrates any level of trust. And, you might fool somebody once, but after that they'll see it. And it's just, and it's not who I would want to be in business anyway as well. And then also the defining what is real success for you so that you're pursuing the right things in the right way. So then therefore all of the efforts that you're putting in is actually accumulating in a positive way. So that's what my analogy of the tap, hose and bucket is.
Yeah, I love that, because It's so easy to get all holes and or have one flowing, but then you get holes in another part. So you could have the tap and hose going really smoothly. You know who your tap is, blah, blah, blah. But then you just, that focus isn't quite there, and all the strategy isn't there. That's where the bucket, you just lose it all. And that's where you lose momentum.
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. And so so you basically have a client come in and you run through this analogy with them and go, all right, where are you right now? And just pinpoint where the holes are?
Yes, in a matter of fact, yes. So a lot of what I do for my clients is reflective listening, and people talk their patterns. If you listen long enough, they'll talk their patterns. So they'll say they really want to do A, but everything they're talking about is pulling them towards B. Or you're seeing how they're tripping up themselves with their beliefs because they're saying this is important, but all of the behavior they're talking about is contradicting it. So again, from that, then I can see, is it their sense of themselves, which is the tap? Or is that pretty solid, but what's happening is they're losing the flow of what's coming out, such as having too much focus. So a lot of times people will come and say they're overwhelmed, which would be a tap problem, or they go, my marketing's not working, which is often like a bucket problem. But it also can be a hose thing because they're not clear enough about their clients. So yes, so basically in talking to them and looking at where they're saying their current challenge in business is, but then we kind of backtrace it a bit, we find what is the last part that's working, and that's where we have to then move forward again.
Yeah, perfect. And so what are some actions our listeners can do today to start improving their business and self-alignment?
Okay, great question. Being really honest with ourselves is first step. So, journaling is a great way to have that really important conversation with yourself about what are your beliefs around success? What's the price you're willing to pay for it? Because as we said, everything has a price. And then see how much responsibility we're taking for what we're creating versus how much blame we're putting on other people or other situations. And that's not to say that we should just put up with whatever's happening, because there's some things within our ability to control and there's some that isn't. But at every point, we choose our reaction to things. We choose the next step in things, which is all about the emotional intelligence and being, reactive or being active. Like, are we living in a reaction to what we think is happening, or are we making conscious, inspired steps? So as far as practical steps, like watching ourselves, listening to ourselves, and again, this is where the journaling comes in, because we can, until we get used to that mindfulness of catching our actual words, it's much easier to see it in the written. So bringing a lot more consciousness to where do we put our time and energy compared to what we say is important to us? Where do we say we have these beliefs, but we're acting differently? So mindfulness is great. Journaling is a huge part of that. Reflective listening, if you have a friend that will call you on it, those friends are beautiful and rare. So not just someone who's going to be your yes person, right? Because they're just going to keep you stuck in your patterns. But someone who loves you enough that you can be vulnerable with and go, this is what's happening for me. This is what I believe about it. And they'll go, okay, well, this is kind of contradicting that. And you're saying this, but your behavior is telling me this. For someone that we feel safe with, to give that kind of reflection back. That's a very powerful way to be witnessed. Because the thing that you said in my intro about inner wisdom, I really, really believe that. I believe we have so much wisdom inside of us, but we've covered it up with a whole lot of stuff that is not ours. So the more safe we feel to unpack the stuff that's hiding our inner wisdom, the more we can tap into our own answers, rather than putting somebody on a pedestal and they have to tell us what to do, because then we become dependent on them. And we don't want that. This is the end of the guru age. No more gurus. You are the only guru you need in life, right? but having support to unpack it so you can honestly see what's going on for you while you feel safe, which is really important. That's a great. So talking with a trusted friend, journaling, these are great places. And just being aware that when we keep saying we want this, what is it that's we're actually doing or believing that's blocking us?
Yeah, and we've had a session before where I realized how much I was in my head. And once I we did a little meditation thing, didn't we? And I just, and suddenly it's like I could breathe and I could actually listen into that inner wisdom. But when you've got that clutter that's thrown at you from things you've seen in social media or people have said or thoughts, stories you've told yourself or whatever, it's very hard to really, so that's where I guess the journaling comes out, because quite often you'd be writing and you're like, oh yeah, what have I just written there? Wow, okay. And you start questioning yourself as you write it, or when you're saying it out loud to a friend and you're like, gee, that makes so much sense. Like, why does it make sense now when I've said it out loud versus when it's all been in your head and all mushed in there with everything else?
I find sometimes when we're trying to think of it, to me, it's like a kitten chasing a ball of wool, ends up like totally entangled in it. You're just chasing. And you love words, I love words, and I find as inexact as the English language can be, when you have to articulate something, either speaking or writing, you have to give it enough form to, start unraveling that ball of wool. So that's where you sometimes, this is where I think if people feel safe enough, they will talk their own patterns out. They will talk their solution out, So I think, yes, writing is great. Talking to a friend is great. If you're not a writer, talk it into your voice memo on your phone. Just something so you're actually getting it out of your head and either onto paper or, verbally out of your mouth.
Because you probably would find that if you go to a friend and then you start talking and then you're like, the friend doesn't say anything. It's all coming out and you're like, oh, thanks for the chat. And they're like, they haven't given you any advice. It's all those situations. You just need that sounding board just to be there.
Sometimes the best conversationalists are the ones who just say nothing.
Just smile and nod.
They're just a good listener, yes.
Yeah, and so, okay, you mentioned the term emotional intelligence before. Can you just define that, just for anyone who's unclear on what that means?
Sure. So there's official definitions, and it's coming up a lot in business circles, which is great. Emotional intelligence is basically self-awareness. So it's about us owning our reaction to things and looking beyond that, but also understanding that the person that we're talking to has their own experience. So, not taking things personally, not being in the, if sometimes we find that something's happened with the client and it's become like bigger than the mountain, and you go, okay, well, the mindfulness, the awareness that just a little bit of the reaction is actually linked to the situation, but everything driving that has to do with other stuff. So that's where developing the emotional intelligence comes in, is firstly recognizing it, and then taking that responsibility for yourself for where's this coming from? What do I need to look at? And also then not taking on other people's thing. Being people pleasers, being, peacekeepers. This is my life story. I was always trying to make other people happy at cost to myself. So for me, one of the key things with emotional intelligence and personal development is self-loving boundaries. So for us to be able to say yes or no to something without making the other person wrong. Sometimes, like say in a business context, sometimes a client will ask you for a discount. And I've heard people lose it. How dare they ask me don't they know how hard I work? I'm like, you know what? It's a question. The fact that you've made it mean they're doubting your worth, all of this, that's your story. That's their question, right? So for you to be able to say, actually, no, that doesn't work for me, without making it mean anything about the person who asked the question, that's a sign of your emotional intelligence and self-loving boundaries. So, and also a lot of what is coming into emotional intelligence from the business perspective is about bringing the humanity back in. You know, I'm sure you heard in the corporate world as well, keep emotion out of business. I think what they're talking about is emotional reaction, right? Whereas true emotion, which is empathy and compassion, that has a definite place in business. You know, when you've got something going on with your staff or a client, being a human who respects yourself and dealing with them as a human that you respect, you're going to get much better, you know, results and a win-win solution and a human outcome, if you want to call it, than if we're totally trying to come just from the intellect.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I say like an about page in a website's really good, because it shows the human element of the business, or, you know, just being visible across social media and not just your sales posts, because the business isn't the sale, it's you ultimately, especially if you're a sole trader. And so it's showing the heart of and soul of what your business is, who you are, and you share. You don't overshare, some people do, but just give a glimpse into your life that you are a human that people can connect with. So that's kind of that element, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, Leah. And a bit about me page is one of the first things I look at when I'm considering somebody. And what I get really irked at is when they tell me nothing. They talk about their, maybe just their credentials or then what they do for you, but they give me no insight to them as a person. And yeah, I definitely, I always seek the human behind, because so what happens is when you connect from a human to human base, so let's just talk pure business, okay? When you connect from a human to human base, you build goodwill, you build trust. And when things go wrong in business, because it does, someone that you have trust and goodwill with is more willing to work with you to find a solution. And sometimes if you do the right thing, they become raving fans afterwards, because not only have you given them good service, you've been there for them, you've been willing to come to the party of how can we help each other, right? Whereas if we're really seeing people as just a number, or we're purely coming from the intellect of I'm right, you're wrong, whatever, there's no room for grace. There's no room for a relationship. So, sometimes there's things that people buy on price. So as soon as there's a cheaper one, they're gone. Or they feel so unseen as a client because all we get is like form emails and, static replies. You're like, you're not seeing me as a person. You're not listening to what's just occurred for me. So you're like, yeah, next. Because most of us don't work in an industry where we are the only, we don't have a monopoly. So if you can't be there to service a person in a way that means something to them, then you might just kind of be by the wayside.
Yeah, because otherwise, big corporations and things like that, you get on hold and you get annoyed with them because it's a faceless organization. You can't really connect with them. But if you had like for example, with a bank, and you've got your advisor through the financial advisor through the bank or whatever it is, then you've got a face, someone to bond with, then you obviously then are more connected to that bank in a different way. Versus just, I'm on this, call center line, I'm trying to get through to someone from even overseas. Very different experience, isn't it?
Yes. And I think it's really interesting because, a couple of years ago, it was the whole thing that automated messaging and AI is going to take over customer service. But most of us are saying, no, I want to talk to a human. For some easy things, sure, you could do a press the button here, press the button there. But for most things, you want the consideration of a human listening to you. So I think there's this huge flow back to people valuing customer service from a human level, which is a good thing, in my opinion.
I agree. That's really great insight. Thanks for all that. And then what I always ask my guests is, how do you manage your own health and wellness?
Okay. Because I also spend a lot of time in my head, I like to unplug and relax with books and movies. I love that whole inner world of the imagination. Or I go for a walk with really loud music in my ears, because I just love a good rock beat to walk to. That sort of gets me lost in space and time. So that's to unplug. So actually, to replenish my energy, which I will do after I unplug, empty it out and then fill it up, is, I love learning anything in the areas of personal development and spiritual growth. So I've usually got some e-course going, some book project I'm doing, something that just is like a love project for me. It has to do with what I would do for work, but I do it because I love it. And I also have the monthly in-person, well, it used to be in person, the last two have been online, circles for the personal and intuitive development. So in that space, I connect with other like-minded people, and we have a deeper experience of ourselves, and that always like brings my energy back up, so I can, it's that full cup scenario for me. So those work really well too. I sometimes I've become aware of when I need to unplug and when I need to replenish. So I've gotten a lot better at noticing my own patterns of, okay, if I've gone crazy, start cleaning the house, it means I'm stressed, which means I need to go for a walk instead.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the process of that at the moment. I'm like, yeah, I need to go for a run. If I'm feeling, or I need to go get outside, just fresh air. If I'm feeling like the anxiety's going to build, I'm like, all right, I know I'm about to lose it and start screaming at everyone. So time to just go and take some deep breaths, and then I know I'll be okay. And then I recognize sometimes, all right, that means if I'm really feeling overwhelmed and scattered, all right, I need to go for a run. And I'm starting to really recognize those signs, and everyone's different. Yes.
Your self-awareness is fabulous, Leanne. But seriously, it just reminded me, when you asked about practical steps, what you just discussed is you're increasing self-awareness, that when you do this, it actually means you need this, right? So that's really key. Unfortunately, what we often get caught in is we might even days later realize a pattern, but because we judge ourselves, it becomes a hard thing to face, right? So what I suggest to people is, when you're looking at your behavior, when you're bringing in mindfulness around your cause and effect, come from a position of compassionate curiosity. Just go, oh, I just lost it at the kids. I wonder what that's about. What do I actually need instead? Rather than, oh, I just did it again, I'm such a terrible mother, So instead of going into that space of judging and anger at ourselves for being less than perfect, bring in the same compassion you would for a little child, and go, okay, what was that about? What did I actually need in that moment? Because with that awareness, we learn to recognize it with less time lapse. So it might begin with, oh my gosh, last week I did this. Now I know what it's about. And eventually that'll become, oh, yesterday I did that. And then before you know it, as you go to open your mouth, you go, oh, this is what that was about. Okay, I just need to take a breath, right?
Yeah.
And that's how the mindfulness and that practice comes in. But first we need to release the judgment on ourselves.
Yeah, like I was getting a bit frustrated with all the clutter around the house, for example. And I'm the type of person, I'll put something down going, I'll deal with it later. And then later, future Leanne gets annoyed with, past Leanne going, why didn't you just clean that up? It's after all the stuff to do. So I get frustrated with the kids making a mess, right? But it's reflecting my own issues. And so I had that a bit the other day. I'm looking around the house going, you know what? I'm just going to sit down for just right now, just clean that shelf out. It's just annoying me. And I just felt this, just release. Like, oh, wow, that just felt so good. And all right, tomorrow I'm just going to clean one more space, and then I'll feel like I'm being productive and not annoyed with myself. But yeah, it's like one little example. Like,
yeah.
And so how can people connect with you?
Okay, so I have my website, which is ArtemissK.com. I also have a Facebook business page under the same name. And I do have a newsletter coming up, which is soon going to be launched with articles, references, videos, how-tos, etc. On my website, you'll also find a bunch of testimonials. And the reason I think testimonials are important is also the reason I offer a 30-minute discovery call. Because, business coaches, we're a bit of a dime a dozen right now, but we all work really differently. And it's really important, we were talking before about you have to feel safe to be able to be open. So I have a 30-minute discovery call. We get to know each other, and then we actually do a 20-minute practical coaching session about whatever is on your mind. Because, if someone wants to work with me, they have to make sure that my style and energy and how I approach things is something they feel comfortable with, something they can lean into. Because if they can't feel safe, they're not going to be vulnerable and they're not going to be honest. So that means anything that comes out is just going to be, facade. And that's a waste of their time, and it's not something I can support them in. So definitely, I think the best way to experience whether or not, and you know what, some people have told me that they got enough out of the 30-minute discovery call that they didn't actually need to book an appointment, and that's okay too. And Leanne, I did the same thing with you. When I had when I booked your discovery call, you gave me so much great thing. I'm like, okay, I could do this stuff, and I'll come back again when I need her because I know I can trust her. So I think a discovery call is a fabulous way to build that trust, especially gives you a sense of whether or not the way that person serves is something that resonates with you.
Oh, 100%. Since I've been doing them, and I've done a lot more like recently, it's really connecting with people. I've had someone refer me to someone else. I haven't even started working with me officially, but just getting that good feel for me. And just because I'm a big believer in talking on the phone, and it comes down to that as well. So picking up the phone and actually connecting with someone, it makes such a difference.
Yes.
I mean, whether you're pitching or you're just getting to know them, you met them briefly and then you want to get to know them a bit better, it makes a world of difference. You throw on the Zoom and you see their face and their mannerisms, and that just adds another level as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your advice today. It's really interesting. I love chatting with you. So thanks to you, a dear listener, for tuning in as well. You can find show notes for the episode at marketingandme.com.au. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe and leave me a rating and review. You're also welcome to join the Marketing and Me podcast Facebook group, where you can ask questions and discuss recent episodes with other listeners. If you're interested in connecting with me, feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn. Just search for Leanne Shelton. And if you want to learn more about content marketing strategies or outsource it to me, or book one of those 30-minute free discovery calls, head to my website, righttimemarketing.com.au. Until next time, I wish you good health and good wealth.